Good morning. Good morning. I am Ben Ayers, Dean of the Terry College of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Terry Third Thursday. This is our monthly breakfast event. It's a great time to connect with alumni, students, and other business leaders in the Atlanta area. I'd like to thank the Alumni Board for arranging today's event as well as this entire series. And also, please join me in thanking our corporate sponsor, Synovus, as well as our two media sponsors, the Atlanta Business Chronicle and WABE, Atlanta Public Broadcasting. Please join me in thanking them as well. Next month, on November 15th, we'll have Alan Mazurek, who's the CEO of Vonage, and then we'll take a break in December and join back again in January. Updates from the Terry College, you may have already seen this, but if in case you haven't, this week Financial Times announced their rankings for executive MBA programs. Here in our Exec Ed Center, we have the EMBA here. Our program ranked 12th among U.S.-based programs. It was the highest ranked program in Georgia, higher than our friends at Emory and Tech, and we were 4th among public business schools, and so it's great to celebrate another national ranking at Terry. In December, we'll start our Economic Outlook series. On December 6th, we'll be at the Georgia Aquarium. Raphael Bostic, who's the president and CEO of the Atlanta Federal Reserve, will provide our national forecast, and I will then do the state economic forecast, and I hope that you all can join us there. New location will be at the Georgia Aquarium this year, and hopefully we will be sharing good news. At this point, we're going to share good news. We'll see what we do in December. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jamie McCurry. Jamie serves as the Chief Administrative Officer of the Georgia Ports Authority. Prior to his role there, he has served in a number of positions: administration, external affairs, and legislative affairs with the Georgia Ports Authority. Before he joined the authority, Jamie was the Senior Product Manager and National Sales Specialist for Brasseler USA. It's a leading supplier of dental and medical instrumentation. He also held a position with Congressman Jack Kingston. He's the immediate past chairman of the National Waterways Conference, an industry-leading advocacy group for waterway programs throughout the U.S. Jamie holds a business degree from Furman University and a master's degree in transportation management from the University of Denver. Please join me in welcoming Jamie McCurry.
But it's great to be here. I'm not sure, well, how many people were in Baton Rouge 5-6 days ago? How many people had to drive home from Baton Rouge on Sunday night with a wife that's a LSU graduate, with 3 children in the car, pulling a trailer of your mother-in-law's old furniture? I'm still very tired, so you'll understand if I'm slipping today. I also should apologize for anybody that might be friends with my father on Facebook. This has become something of an award ceremony for me today to be here. I've heard from aunts that I never hear from that thank you and congratulations. And I said, Dad, I'm Cliff. I'm just the backup speaker. But anyways, we'll try and do that. So another question. How many people have been to the Port of Savannah? That's a lot of people. How many people were at the State of the Port presentation a couple weeks ago? Okay, so just 2 or 3 of you. That's good because this is the same presentation. Well, I'm going to focus mostly on Savannah, but we'll talk a little bit about our other facilities in Georgia. And this will be really a kind of a recap of where we have been over the last year and few years prior and what we're looking at going forward. So I will move through a long slide deck here with a few videos and hopefully leave some time for questions at the end. So with no further ado, we'll start hopefully with a video. Maybe we could turn the volume up. Normally this volume is too loud and nobody can hear afterwards, but this time it's not. This is what it looks like every day when we come into work. There's the soundtrack playing, the sun's rising. Everybody's really motivated to get to it. You'll see statistics like that throughout the program. It's kind of the same story over and over again. Of late, we're record year after record year, but we're pretty pleased with where we stand, and in order for us to keep going, we just got to keep plowing more money into the facilities and keep up with the CapEx plan. All right. So, some highlights. Apologize for the volume being a little low there, but when we talk about the GPA, a lot of times people think of the Port of Savannah, and they don't realize that we also have the Port of Brunswick, and they very often don't realize that we have a port in Bainbridge, and we now have a port just outside of Chatsworth in northwest Georgia. But we do have 4 facilities. Actually used to have a facility in Columbus as well. I'll say that in terms of Bainbridge, while I'll spend most of my time talking about Savannah a little bit today on Brunswick, Bainbridge is definitely a place that I hope everyone will keep in your thoughts and prayers. We were fortunate. We had damage, but not severe damage. All of our employees had damage to their homes, though, and obviously a lot of folks down there, and in particular in the ag community in Georgia, really had a bad week. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Moving towards Brunswick, though, we have 2 small facilities, Mayor's Point and the East River Terminal, that primarily serve the South Georgia forest products industry. But at Colonel's Island, we have what is kind of the bookend to the container facility in Savannah. Savannah is the largest single container terminal in the United States. Colonel's Island is the largest single auto port in the United States in terms of size. Now it's number 2, 3, back and forth in terms of throughput handled. With just under 600,000 units last year. We call it RO-RO, which is roll on, roll off. A lot of that is cars, some heavy machinery. If you've ever gone to Jekyll, you drive right over Colonel's Island coming from I-95, and when you see massive parking lot, that's what you're looking at. And anytime, this goes for Savannah or Brunswick, anybody wants to see those places, feel free to give us a shout. We're happy to show them off because it's a very impressive area to see. But down in Brunswick, we have been hitting up against capacity down there, and so we've embarked upon an expansion program at Colonel's Island similar to what we have in Savannah, which is trying to stay about 20% ahead of the curve in terms of annualized capacity demand. So over the last 2 years, we've developed nearly 200 additional acres at Colonel's Island Auto Facility. Spent just a little bit of money doing that, but fortunately, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're really not limited for the foreseeable future in what we can do at Colonel's Island. We've got 500 already permitted acres on what we call the south side of the island. That's away from the water, but it's a great space for storage of cars. On the north side of the island, which would be right behind the 3 berths that we have there, and hopefully soon a 4th berth. We do have one area that we are redeveloping. It's an old underutilized agri-bulk facility that we will be converting over the next year, year and a half into additional dockside RO-RO space. And that's, I could get into the minutia of what that means for us, but it's just important to know that that really sets us up to have space for, again, the foreseeable future down in Brunswick, like we have in Savannah. In Savannah, we currently have 2 facilities, the Garden City Terminal, which we'll focus on today, Ocean Terminal, which if you're familiar with downtown Savannah, right underneath the Talmadge Bridge is where Ocean Terminal is, and it goes across the Hutchinson Island where conveniently directly across the river, we have a couple hundred acres over there for future development. So we're well positioned in the Savannah to continue to grow. Last year was a great year for Ocean Terminal. And one of the things about Ocean Terminal that if you're kind of not in our industry, it might not look as impressive, but Ocean Terminal at a couple hundred acres really serves Garden City Terminal by handling everything that Garden City doesn't. We have break bulk cargo, which is cargo that's packaged but not packaged into containers. And you can see we had a record year there for break bulk cargo. That includes primarily forest products, iron, steel, and rubber. Those are the big commodities. And then we also have autos and heavy machinery there as well. Not nearly what you see down at Colonel's Island, but it's an interesting complement to Colonel's Island because the services that do not serve around the globe from Brunswick come to Ocean Terminal. In particular, the oceanic trades, which would be Australia and New Zealand. So we have that niche filled that supports Brunswick, and then all that cargo that's not containerized cargo, Ocean Terminal is an outlet for that in Savannah, so that Garden City, which again is the largest single container terminal facility, actually in the Western Hemisphere. We say North America, but there's not one in South America that's any larger, nor Central America. 1,200 acres. It's a unique asset. One of the things that really goes back to the origin of the Port Authority, being a state port authority that's allowed to be an owner-operator, as opposed to in a lot of other locations, they're municipal ports, and they're also landlord ports, so that the port really is just a real estate owner and somebody else is controlling it. In Garden City, we have got the space that you would typically see broken up by 2 or 3 or even 4 different operators, but then you're just putting fence lines down on 1,200 acres, and you lose the continuity of flow. You can't adjust for, if one ship's early or late, you can't accommodate that because you're on a strict schedule. You also don't tend to have on-dock rail that serves that much cargo like we do at Garden City. So last year we were fortunate that we set a record with 4.2 million TEUs. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent container unit. So if you're driving down the highway and you see a short box, that's a TEU. Most of the boxes actually are 40-foot boxes. That was an increase, as you can see here, of 8.4% at over 300,000 units. When I started originally at the Port Authority back in '97, we did about twice that in a year, and so that's our growth number for 2018, which is pretty phenomenal for those of us that have been there for a little while. How that compares to other ports in the region in general, this includes Norfolk. Norfolk really is not typically included in our southeastern region, but what this slide shows is our growth in total volume last year. So that 325, how does that compare to the other ports in the region? And you'll see that it's not necessarily twice all of the other ports. Jacksonville had a great year. There was a lot of hurricane-related cargo in and out of Jacksonville last year that I'm not going to say falsely inflated that, but it's just they had a tremendously busy year, and a lot of that was associated with Puerto Rican trade, which is their linchpin. But when you look at the other ports in the southeast, not only is Savannah currently about twice the total volume of the second busiest port in the southeast, taking Norfolk out of this equation, but we're growing at greater than that same rate. So Savannah is the load center port for the southeastern United States. And when you compare it to the largest ports in the country as a whole, it's the same story. We are the 4th busiest total in throughput. LA and Long Beach are 1 and 2. New York and New Jersey are 3. And when I say that, LA and Long Beach are literally side by side. I mean, there's almost an indistinguishable boundary between the two. But going back to the point of us being a single terminal owner and operator, in LA and Long Beach, there's 13 separate container terminals that make up that volume that's greater than Savannah. And in New York and New Jersey, there's 6. Not to mention the fact that it's Los Angeles and New York. It's not Savannah. But Savannah has the unique facility and the unique ability to continue to grow and accommodate the demand that's being placed on us. Part of that is trucks. You'll definitely see a lot of trucks going in and out of Savannah, but it's in a largely congestion-free environment. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't bad moments where there's an accident right outside the gate or there's a computer glitch, but generally speaking, you'll see trucks constantly flowing in and out of the terminal without backups that you just don't see in other ports. Last year we did over 2 million transactions in and out of our gates. So there's 20-foot equivalent units is one measure, total transactions through the gates is another. This slide is my favorite slide in the whole program here because it shows a record date. So just under 12,000 transactions in a single day. And that's an in or an out of the gate. Well, not counting yesterday, I was hoping that I could say each of the last 3 Wednesdays, but we've had last Wednesday and the Wednesday prior were the first 2 days that we broke 12,000 gate moves in a single day. So there's no slowing down. Again, congestion free, thank goodness, but these numbers just continue to grow, and we're very fortunate that the state not only is allowing us to invest in our infrastructure, but it's got the connecting infrastructure to the facility to accommodate that. One of the other unique advantages I mentioned in terms of the size of our facility is it allows us to have 2 Class 1 railroads on property, which is very unusual. A lot of ports you'll see the trucks have to drive from the container terminal to a rail yard separately. Well, for us, all that can happen on terminal, and to the tune of close to 500,000 rail lifts in addition to the over 2 million truck transactions last year. That's a record, and it's going to continue to grow because we're going to get into our robust rail program here in a little while. SHEP is my first child, Cliff's first grandchild. It is going on, it's legal drinking age actually now. SHEP is the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project. We have been doing this for far too long, but we're fortunate that at this point we are past the halfway mark. It says 50% complete, it's probably more like 53, 54%. That includes the entrance channel. So there's a whole lot that is in this project that's construction that has nothing to do with dredging. But in terms of the dredging, the actual deepening itself, it's basically 2 halves, the entrance channel and the inner harbor. And in the inner harbor, there's actually going to be 2 different contracts, but both of those contracts will be awarded and begun in the coming year. So we're very excited about that. Should click sooner. Entrance channel, the inner harbor should be done by the end of 2021. And that is, gosh, that'll be a great day. I may have to go to dinner that night. Now, in terms of funding, and this has been a question and certainly been a political issue for a while now, what about the federal funding? Well, the state of Georgia, through what we call accelerated funds agreement, was propping up the project for quite some time. But FY18, which is now just passed, the federal fiscal year 18, was the first year that we had full capability funding from the federal government. So the project was actually fully funded with the federal appropriations last year. For FY19, we're hoping to see the same. We've got half of what would be called full capability already from the appropriations bill. But there's something called the work plan, which is discretionary money that the Corps and the administration will be announcing here in the next, I think, 3 weeks. And hopefully Savannah will see another chunk that comes with that puts us again at full federal funding. Because we've got about $300 million in place now in state money. As I say about because there's a little more that's available. Over the past 20 years, that again has floated the project. But these last 3 years, we're going to need yet again another almost $400 million that should be that federal spending. Now that you see in the chart here, that does include 19, so if we have a capability number, we're really going to be talking about the last 2 years of significant funding for the project. One, when you say 2020, it's crazy is it to say that, that's the budget that the president will recommend in February. And then 1 year after that, hopefully we're talking about being done with the big money. But when you talk about that cost, and it's an extraordinary number to be at $1 billion, but when you have a 7.3 to 1 ROI, a benefit to cost ratio is how the Corps of Engineers looks at projects, it's hard to argue that it's not where we should be spending money. Where you come up with that ROI is in transportation cost savings to shippers, exporters, importers. How much does it cost to send goods in and out of Savannah? And that's really made up in what you can't put on a ship today. Because if 42 feet, get 5 more feet, you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 boxes per ship per foot of draft. And when you do times 5 times 37 calls a week, that's a lot of money. From the industry side, that comes with these 14,000 TEU vessels, which is the maximum ship that can come through the Panama Canal. We were seeing those before the Panama Canal expansion coming from the Suez Canal, but what we expect to see in the future is 22,000 TEU ships that, again, will not fit through the expanded Panama Canal, but will be able to come to us on transatlantic services from the Suez Canal. So the transitions that we've seen over the last 20 years that have necessitated a deepening, I'm not saying that we're going to do another one, but they're going to require us to prepare our infrastructure for even larger ships. So that's what we're building our terminal out for. That's what we'll be preparing roadways for. And fortunately, with our tide, we're able to accommodate these larger ships on a scaled basis, if you will, with the high tide, twice a day high tide. Something that's a little industry-centric for us, the ILA, which is the International Longshoremen's Association, and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, they went into a 6-year contract extension this year, which is the longest extension that they have enjoyed. And while we're not a party to that, those are our customers. And so when they're arguing with each other and one's refusing to work for the other, that certainly impacts our business and impacts our volumes. So we're very excited that this is coast-wise. This is the East Coast and the Gulf Coast that this affects. The difference here is this is a much more improved environment than what you typically see on the West Coast. And not to be competing here with the West Coast, but when you look at our major growth years in terms of our volume, when we've hit these big bumps up, it's been because there's been labor issues on the West Coast that has necessitated that cargo moving to the East Coast or it wouldn't have an outlet. So to see a 6-year agreement in place so we don't have to worry about it until 2023, 24 time frame, that's very exciting for us. So we're going to continue to build out and be ready for it. Warehouse space. This is for you, Mal. So last year at our State of the Port, we said, we have a dearth of warehouse space. We need more. We encourage the industry to get out there and invest. And so last year, 6 million square feet came online in the general Savannah area. Well, 5.7 million of that was absorbed. So Savannah is actually it's the hottest market for industrial real estate that's kind of port related. And we right now, this is hard to even believe, that you have less than 1% vacancy rate in this major industrial space. Fortunately though, our partners, Rooker and Solution and others, they're building more, and we expect to see close to 10 million more square feet come online in the next year or so. And actually a good portion of that is in some property that we own and are working with our partners on, so that's exciting. Obviously we are a state authority and we're proud of how the state does in terms of jobs. That's why we exist, to improve economic development for the state. Last year was a great year for Georgia, and fortunately a great portion of that was port-related jobs. And again, that's why we're here. And we're also here to celebrate the brain power that is the Terry School of Business. So we hire Terry to do our economic impact studies about every 3 years or so. These numbers are actually based on 2017 data, and when you look at our record year after record year, these are already out of date. I just can't afford to pay Dr. Humphreys to do this every year. But things are going well. I feel like we're fulfilling our mission here. And we talk about, we take this roadshow, if you will, come to the Atlanta area. Not surprisingly, a great portion of the jobs are really in this region. It's not the Savannah port. And going back to the deepening project for a minute, it's expensive, and you're going to state legislators and you're going to congressmen and you're saying, hey, we need your help getting this project done. It's a state-federal partnership. We need money. Well, why? Why do we need money? Well, it's because it's jobs in your region. This is not Savannah. It's not Chatham County. It's the state of Georgia, and it's really beyond the state. And we've actually tried to get a better gauge on what the job numbers are in the surrounding states. Not surprisingly, they don't really want to share as much with us as we share with ourselves. But those jobs are not all big industry. Some of these are small businesses as well.
It's amazing how Georgia Ports treats us. Because now, since I'm trading across the globe, I'm able to get things affordably. I'm able to get things with that same quality, if not better. I'm able to scale those quantities as well to as large as what's going on in my marketplace. And that's from a small business furniture store guy. They treat us like family. Any issues, questions, anything we have, they've been there to walk us through the process. And quite frankly, they have been our shepherd with dealing with the globe. And I saw the writing on the wall that I really had to figure out value. And Georgia Ports has helped me to be able to amplify my voice across a national platform to show, hey, this is the value that we have, that we bring out of Savannah with our designs, with our expertise, and we can get it to your door from all over the world. And we could not do that without Georgia Ports.
So that's a friend of ours, Rule Joyner, who owns 24E in Savannah, and for the rest of my life, I'll be hearing about that video. But it is why we exist. It's not just Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart and Target and Amazon. Amazon's interesting. Amazon was not a customer of ours 4 years ago. When we ask them for a forecast now, it's, well, it'll be double or triple next year. Well, you're at double or triple. That's their ongoing growth forecast for us. It's not double or triple. And you know what? That's exactly what's happened. It's unbelievable. They're from 0 to number 8 in 3 years, and I suspect they'll be probably 5 or so next year in terms of our total rankings. But the small business owner is a big part of it, and it just doesn't get as much attention, so we wanted to share that. Network Georgia, that is our program of expanding our rail operations around the state. So you've got the terminal in Savannah. How do you take that terminal closer, make it more accessible to the inland markets? We have now our first inland port that we own and operate, like I said earlier, outside of Chatsworth and Crandall, Georgia. It's called the ARP, for Appalachian Regional Port. And what that port will do is essentially take over 700 miles of truck driving off the road. Because when you have an import load, it goes to that area for delivery. Now you've got an empty box. You've got to take the box back to the port. That's where you come up with a 700 miles worth of driving that can be eliminated by putting that same box on a train and just being there. So we're excited that this is now
particularly the Savannah
operational.
port is crucial to what we do. It's the most economical port for us. It's the closest port. The Appalachian Regional Port does that for us. It gives us another place where we can get our products to the port faster, more quickly, more efficiently, and then to our customers.
We've started manufacturing lumber that is shipped all over the world, from Egypt to China. With the lumber market being global instead of regional like it used to be, that facility in Crandall will become very important to everybody in the hardwood industry.
We will reduce the volume of materials that we are bringing by trucks. Having the containers coming by train will reduce CO2 emissions. Having less trucks on the road, we will have more Volkswagen on the highways.
That's the key line. If you could hear it, it's having less trucks on the roads and more Volkswagens on there. That was not scripted, but it's fantastic. And so we're not going to stop with the ARP. We're going to look at other markets. We're going to look at Northeast Georgia. We're going to look at West Central Georgia, and there may be others. But it's important for us to be able to continue to grow, not have a congested environment, getting those boxes out of our facility to the inland market and vice versa, directly on rail. The biggest single ingredient to that at the Garden City Terminal is what we call Mega Rail, which actually has a really nice long official name because it was part of a federal grant application. It's now become about a $200 million project, and $44 million of that was through a federal fast lane grant that we received from federal DOT through MARAD, and that was the largest single award during that program. And what it'll allow us to do is take our CSX yard, which is what you're looking at in the picture here, and take it through our terminal, cross the highway that runs in front of our facility, and onto property that we own where the Norfolk Southern operates. And this is what it looks like about today in terms of the construction progress. But taking those tracks, joining the two yards, and then we end up with the ability to double our overall capacity in what is now the Norfolk Southern yard, have both of those railroads operating in there on the same footprint, but with much denser operation with overhead cranes. It'll start sometime in about 12 to 15 months with operation of what will be the initial phase where Norfolk Southern will be. Then they'll switch over to the next phase, which will be about a year behind that, and CSX will move into where Norfolk Southern has been operating and will be operating the the initial phase of this development. And what that allows us to do, not just to continue to grow in rail, but the reason it was probably so compelling from a federal grant perspective is it densifies that rail operation and pulls all of the switching of the two railroads onto our property. So if you've ever had the pleasure of sitting at a stoplight, a rail bar, and watch a train slowly cross and stop and then slowly go back the other way and go back. That's because it's switching in and out of a yard, and that is about as painful of a driving experience as you can enjoy. So that'll stop, and in particular, the community that's around the port there, the worst case scenario of those, it basically cuts off that town of emergency access. So it's a huge public safety, community improvement, but also it can't be overstated the impact that it'll have on our operations as well. Importantly, that puts us in a better position to access the central part of the country for our trade. You know, when you look at Los Angeles to get to Memphis, you're talking over 2,000 miles. From Savannah, it's just over 700. Chicago, a little bit further from Savannah, but it's still a 1,000-mile improvement over accessing the same market from the West Coast. The reason that we can't do that as well today is we just don't have the space to build a full unit train that can pull out on a daily basis and go directly to those markets. By increasing the space with the mega rail, we can pull full unit trains 2 to 3 times a day out of that facility. So the mega rail is a part of this, but Garden City today can accommodate not only the 4.2 million that we did last year, but about another million TEUs. For us to get to where we need to be over the next decade, we got to do a lot more than that. So we got to look at our current footprint and how can we densify that? How can we add equipment? How can we adjust what's happening on the property and making what's closest to the vessel dedicated to the vessel and removing all of what would be support activities, whether it be office space, warehouse space, empty yards, because I mentioned earlier exchanging an empty container. Well, you have to have empty containers. You have to have bare chassis available to drivers to come and pick up to get your export load after you drop an import load. So all that, you push it as far out as you can. That gives you the dedicated space closer to the berth for the ship. The gates, if we're going to continue to have a congestion-free environment, the gates can't stay the same size. We've got to add gates and expand gates. There goes my office. And some passionate discussions on what would be a better location for it. But it definitely needs to move, because this is our, we call it gate 4. That's our busiest gate, and it's probably 2 or 3 times as big as any other gate in the country, and we'll double that. An old refrigerated warehouse, we've already demolished that, and we'll be consolidating our crane operations into that. So basically taking 2 buildings, combining them into one. And then again, this is really what the mega rail will look like. It's very expensive to illustrate, so I hope you enjoy it. And I won't expect you to quickly count all those cranes, but that's 40 cranes on the dock. We have 9, maybe 10 berths for ships, and we need to be able to put 4 to 6 cranes on a vessel at a time. You just won't see that in the United States. You go to Asia, you'll see it. You go to Europe, you might see it. But to see a 1,200-acre facility with over 10,000 linear feet of berth and 40 cranes working on them is a truly unique thing to see. So I encourage you, if you're in Savannah, it could be classes that want to come through. We're happy to host them, but it is a compelling view. In terms of workforce development, this is neat. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of sound with this one, but workforce development is a constant challenge, of course. I think every community would say that. One of the things that we felt like we have kind of lost over the years is there's dozens of people that work for the Port Authority that have been there for 40 years, some at 50 years. And to do that, you come out of high school and you go work there. You don't get to 50 years at a location and retire at 65, 68, and have not come straight out of high school. So what we've tried to do is to go back to our high schools and not necessarily say, hey, look, you don't need to go to college, but if you're not going to go to college, to make it clear that there are opportunities out there and we need workers. Don't give up on yourself because you may think that your opportunities are limited. So, and this is all Griff. He should be up here talking about this because this is entirely his idea, and really pushed our human resource manager to get this done last year. But we established what you can see is called the YES program. youth learning equipment and safety, and we're going to the high schools and saying, hey, we would like for recommendations for kids that are not planning to go to college, that are looking for a job, that are good kids. And they interviewed for jobs. And this year was the first year we did it. These are the first 8 young men that we hired, and they are now in the 2nd month of this program. Over the course of the next really 2 years, they'll go from high school to being, a full-time equipment operator position that you would, side by side somebody that's been there 10, 15 years and has that experience. They will have enjoyed all the training to get there and be doing the same job. And these are jobs that, they're pretty good jobs. We're talking about $18, $20, $25 an hour jobs with great benefits in a safe, secure environment. We have to be safe. But it's the environment that you would want to have a secure future in. And they can take that and do anything they want with it. They don't have to stay with us for 40 years. If they want to, they'll have the opportunity to. And we're going to continue to work on this program and hopefully expand it to other communities as well. And with that, I think we'll close out with this.
This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port.
If you can't hear it, they're all saying this is my port.
It's my port.
This is my port.
This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port.
This is my port.
This is
My port.
This is
This is my port.
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 This is my
This is my port. This is my port. This is my port. This is my port.
This is my port.
This is our port.
Fortunately, he feels that way. It's been a good 8 years for us. So, with that, I'll take any questions.
And we've got microphones that will raise your hand.
Jamie, talk about the Talmadge Bridge, about the need to.
It's just going to go right there. You're not gonna wait, not gonna let it come up. Just go right to the bridge. When we look at those ships, and I said there's 14,000 TEU ships, and then the next wave is going to be these 22,000 TEU ships. Today, those 20+ thousand TEU ships do not call the United States. They are intra-Asia. They're Asia-European trade lanes, and the way historically those any next class, if you will, vessels cycles to our market is just in the ship builds and what's coming into the inventory. The largest ships operate in those foreign trade lanes because that's where most of the volume is, and as they have more and more of those vessels, they cycle them towards the United States. And looking at what the lines are forecasting to us, those 22,000 TEU ships are going to be calling the United States, and in particular the East Coast, in the next decade and a half. We think probably in the 2030 horizon. Some will say sooner, some will say never, but a 22,000 TEU ship cannot fit under the Talmadge Bridge. And so when we look at even the 14,000 TEU ships today, it is, if you're standing on River Street, you're probably backing up if you hadn't seen it happen because you're pretty sure that that bridge is going to come down. I mean, the ships barely fit underneath them today, and the next level of vessels just will not safely fit. And so as we look to the future, that Talmadge Bridge could be and it was expected to be a real limiting factor in the same context as the Bayonne Bridge in New York was for a long time, a limiting factor to ships going in and out of New York and New Jersey. So we will be looking at what can be done there. We're fortunate that we not only have the property we do have, we have other properties, but it would be a fool's errand to go build a whole new Garden City terminal when the limiting factor is a bridge. We've got nearly $2 billion worth of asset value at Garden City Terminal, and you don't give up on something like that when you've got a single limiting factor. So we're going to have to look at that and see where we go. But that'll be for road engineers to decide. That's an area of expertise that's not ours, other than to say ship won't fit. So we'll see.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? I tend to break electronics, so. while talking about your Workforce Yes program, you threw out two numbers that I think resonated with me, and you said, individuals that want to be there 40 to 50 years. So that caused me to think, what is the average tenure at your port in Savannah?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I will guess at the answer and tell you that it's probably somewhere in the high teens to low 20s in terms of average tenure. Because when you're growing as much as we have, you've got a lot of new people. And we're at we're closing in on 1,300 employees at the Georgia Ports Authority now. When I mentioned earlier that we're an owner-operator, we've got people that are working in operations. There are a lot of people that work at our facility that are not our employees. But when you look at our employees, we've probably doubled the operational team in terms of people that are hands on the ground, boots on the ground working over the last 4 or 5 years. And so there's obviously a lot of new people, but they're side by side people that have been there 10, 20, 30 years. So I'm thinking that 16, 18 years is probably a good guess. And some people just don't work out, that happens every round.
Hi, good morning. There's a lot of discussions this year on international trade and with tariffs. How do you factor that into your projections?
So I knew that question was going to be asked. And it's a very difficult one to answer. Forget the fact that I would, by nature, give a very careful political answer to it. It's when you look at the year that we're having, the calendar year that we're having, it is without question our best year. We're on our 23rd month in a row of year-over-year record. So September was a significant increase over September of 17. But you can't look at this year and say, oh, these tariffs, either whether it's those that have gone into place or just the dialogue has impacted our trade negatively, because look at the numbers. What we don't know is how much was advanced before the different rounds of tariffs. How much are we seeing right now that's pre-January? We don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what happens after the first of the year. There are ports and there are partners of ours that are a lot more vocal on the subject from a political perspective. I think that in fairness, what we really want to see is negotiation. Let's figure it out. Let's eliminate the uncertainty. Right now, I can't tell you that it's having a negative impact on us, but I can't also tell you exactly what is happening. It's just, it's murky, and you'd have to go to individual shippers and ask them, what are you doing? And some will tell you, some, you can't get that answer. So, not really sure. Someone else. Go ahead, Dad.
On that note, talk to us about the balance of import-exports relative to competition.
That's a very good question. So we do pride ourselves on having a balanced import-export ratio. Georgia, and really the Southeast as a whole, tends to be a lot more balanced than other parts of the country. But when you look at us and our position in the market, our size, and for us to essentially be balanced is very unique. LA is going to be 70+% import to their export. Interestingly, LA is the largest containerized export port in the country. We're the second busiest. So that just shows you how much bigger that port is than us. For them to be such a, 30% or so compared to our 50% or so on the ratio, but be, significantly higher than us in terms of total volume. But nonetheless, it shows that what the Southeast and Georgia in particular is in terms of being a producer, not just forest products and ag, but also more and more in manufacturing. And then, of course, as a consumption zone and where we are here in Atlanta, this is what drives a lot of trade for the southeastern United States, and particularly for us. So Georgia's great in terms of balance. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Could you talk about security and how that impacts you as all of this comes into our country? What have you had to do in the last 5, 10 years that have just changed the way that you receive all of that product?
I would say in terms of security, what we've had to do over the last 5 to 10 years, we've not had to do much differently in that period of time, other than continue to, as we grow, security is a part of that CapEx spending, and it has to stay there. But the ratio, the type of investment hasn't really changed. Go back to 2001, and it's a different story. Post 9/11, everything changed, and we had a number of different rules and how cargo is viewed, not just at the port, but at the port that is of origin. So a lot of the security for us in terms of what might be coming into the country that could harm us has to happen at the port of origin. So there's Customs they're in charge of security of cargo. So Customs has got programs in place. There's programs that you can sign up for where you're kind of like TSA pre-check. It's the same stuff for cargo, but they're also doing things behind the scenes that you wouldn't know in terms of profiling. What are they going to look at before it gets on the ship? What are they going to look at as soon as it comes off the ship? There's randomness to what they do, and there's programs to what they do. Coast Guard is responsible for the vessel security, what's on our waters, and then we're responsible for the footprint, for the real estate. So the Port Authority and our Port Police Department secures our perimeter, and then the two federal agencies are really the other two legs of that three-legged stool in terms of security. And it is robust. There are constantly new technologies, but it's really you kind of talk about it in a pre versus post 9/11 environment and the kind of attention that is paid to security at ports in general. Fortunately, for the most part, that doesn't impact operations. I'll tell you that Customs, we definitely need more officers on the ground for clearing cargo. As we grow, the same percentage of cargo that's viewed by Customs that they want to take a look at, whether it's full strip out of a container, partial strip out, or just open the doors to check it. If they don't add officers, as we're adding volume, that becomes a flow impact. Hope that answers the question. Oh, okay. Mr. Gates?
You guys are experiencing explosive growth, but what kind of keeps you up at night? What do you really see as your biggest threat to continue on that trajectory?
Well, right now, what's going to keep me up at night is the advice that you gave me before the program, and I won't share that with everybody else. But what keeps us up at night is, when we talk about our CapEx program, and we've gone from saying, we're going to spend nearly $100 million a year over the next 10 years on CapEx to, well, we're spending $150 million a year in CapEx. So now we're going to be looking at nearly $200 million a year in CapEx to stay ahead of that curve. Garden City at some point will be limited, and what comes after that? Many may have heard of the Jasper Ocean Terminal, which is a bi-state project with South Carolina. The timing needs of that is different between Georgia and South Carolina, and we would need it a lot sooner than they would. So, because of Garden City running out of space at some point. So we've got to look at what do we do between Garden City and the ability to bring the first phase of Jasper online. So those type of planning horizons keep us up at night. The money side of that, not as much, because as we continue to grow, the beauty of our structure with the state is that we are basically a self-sufficient operating business of the state. So our net goes into our facilities. We have been charged with making sure that we take care of whatever is within the fence line, and the state and the local communities are going to focus on the roads, the bridges, the waterway in the case of the Corps. So we've been empowered to continue to invest in our facilities, and maintaining that growth rate has given us what we need to keep up financially. But the location component of that between Garden City and Jasper will be an interesting equation. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Anything else? Yes, sir.
As you know, we're in election season, and you said Governor Hill has been very, favorable governor for authority. What do you see on the landscape? How much money do you guys put in lobbying? What do you see on Stacey Abrams?
And I made the comment I made about the trade. How am I going to answer that one now? We don't put much money into lobbying. We handle that with staff. I'm engaged in it. We have other folks on our team that are more engaged at the state and local level. I tend to focus on the federal side. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that I don't care, but whoever wins, we're on their team. We work for Georgia, and the governor is the governor. And we've been fortunate that regardless of the party of that governor over the last well, period. We have done well. We've had very good relationships with governors and their offices and their staff. They have different priorities from one another, perhaps, and we'll see, how that may or may not affect us. But, in terms of what our role is in the state, what does the Georgia Code say we're there for and what we can do, I don't foresee that changing, and I think that we'll be a part of their economic development team in an appropriate way. And, I think when I said earlier that we're a self-sufficient operating business of the state, that shouldn't be confused in terms of the state's putting a bunch of money into us and then we're being able to just spend it. When I say self-sufficient, we do not get appropriations. And you may see us in the bond package for the harbor deepening project because that's a pass-through for the state share to the federal government. We have received appropriations in the past. We can receive appropriations. We have received bonds for, facility improvements on our property, but we're at a scale today. We've kind of reached that critical mass where not only do we not require that at the time, but we've paid off all of our debt service to the state. So we have no current debt service to the state, and we don't have any private sector debt either. We have the ability to do it. We can get money from the state. We can issue our own bonds, and we can certainly go borrow money. So we're set up to work well, but it's not like, a different legislative cycle or gubernatorial cycle comes through and we're begging and pleading for, the money that we pay our employees or our medical benefits. We're very fortunate that the state had the foresight to set us up the way that it did, and I dare say that if I got an honest answer from ports around the country, that they wouldn't say, yeah, if we could be set up like that, that'd be a lot better. How's that for dodging? Yes, sir.
So you talked a little bit about the expansion of the ports. Can you talk about the current mix of destination of the products that are coming in ports as well as
Sure.
regionally?
That's a great question. So the trading partner mix, if you will. Savannah, and kind of going into our 20-plus years of record-breaking growth, a lot of that has been because of how we're set up and our ability to grow and accommodate the growth. A lot of that has been Atlanta. A lot of that has just been that physical facility that is Garden City Terminal. But a lot of it also is the fact that Savannah is historically the primary trading partner in the region with Asia. And it's probably a bad joke, but it's kind of like being country when country wasn't cool. I mean, being the #1 trading partner with Japan and Korea and China 30 years ago was like, oh, great. Now it's a big difference. And so 80+% of our trade is with Asia, and the lion's share of that is with China now. So it's certainly a different, global trade perspective today than it was 20, 30 years ago. And fortunately, the change has benefited us. Now, of course, back to the tariffs question, depending on how some of that sorts out, that could be an interesting scenario. But we're well positioned with those partners in those countries. I think that if you go back and look at how trade with the other regions has been affected by that, it's grown. It's just that you can't keep up with the growth rate of Asia. Other ports have grown probably in a similar, maybe even larger rate in terms of their trade with Asia growth rate versus our trade, because we had it all to begin with. We have not traditionally been a major trading partner with Europe. I shouldn't say traditionally, going way back we were, of course, but last generation, that's been more Charleston. Jacksonville has been more Caribbean and South America. That's what we call north-south versus east or west. But as we've grown, you can't avoid the scale that the Port of Savannah is. So the European trade has come with that. The Indian subcontinent, that didn't exist much in terms of trade until recently. And we dominate that as well as the Northeast Asian trade. So we're well positioned in terms of balance, as much so as you can be. And I think that since it's not balanced globally, if you look at us and you say, okay, how do you compare to the global scenario, we're in a pretty good spot. We have, actually, even more than New York, we have more weekly services, global services, than any other port on the East Coast. So access to Savannah and really ultimately Atlanta is better for us regardless of market than just about any place. So I'm not sure if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's my answer. All right. Yes, sir.
That's the global side. What about the domestic side? How far do you guys stretch from the Port of Savannah throughout Georgia to southeast? Do you go up to Chicago and go there?
We do. We don't do it as well as we feel like we can. And so the mega rail and that, what we call the Mid-American Arc, it's not in the program, but from a trade development, our sales group, one of their business strategies and that we're getting graded on is how much can we develop that relationship with the Midwest. And the Mid-American Arc is really, you saw Memphis and you saw Chicago on the slide. It's that route up connecting those two. You can get to Dallas faster through Savannah than you can through Houston, depending on the service. Because if that's a transit, actually, almost if it's a Panamanian service. We're the largest port partner with the Panama Canal. There are more services to Savannah than any other port from the Panama Canal. And if it's easiest for you to be on one of those ships, the most cost-effective way for you to get to the United States is be on one of those ships, you can come off in Savannah and be 2 days to Dallas on rail. So that's pretty compelling. You know, you go Houston, and this is not a good bad Houston statement. When you go to Houston, you're committed to the Gulf. When you go to Savannah, you're committed to the East Coast. And when you look at how the port rotations work, you know, we tend to see more of that cargo. And so we believe we can expand our opportunities in those regions as we are able to expand our rail. But it has to be on rail. It's not that you obviously can't get there by truck, and people don't do it today, but to do it in any kind of measurable mass, you need the rail unit. And you need dedicated trains going to those markets on a at least weekly basis, not daily basis. All right. Okay, then. Go Dogs.
Thank you, Jamie. Great job. As I tour the state doing our economic outlook, a consistent message is the strength of Georgia's logistics and transportation industry. A big part of that is Georgia Ports Authority. That's one of the things that define us as a state. So thank you for all your work with the authority and the impact that you're having on our great state. And in recognition for your being with us today, we have a nice red and black sculpture which matches your wonderful tie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
If we have not paid for your parking, we would love to do so. We can validate that on the way out. Next month we'll have Alan Mazurek, who's the CEO of Vonage. I hope everyone has a wonderful time. And next month we'll be celebrating our victories over Georgia, over Florida, Kentucky, and then Auburn. So look forward to seeing you next month.
Yeah, I like that.
We'll get the names.